Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of UFC Roundup. I'm Paul Felder with my man Michael Chiesa, and we had another amazing pay-per-view. Fans are back, and Mike, I think it's safe to say they have been missed. They bring such an energy to these fights. I mean, the fights themselves were absolutely bananas, but just with that crowd in there, it adds so much to the atmosphere, so much to the energy of these fighters, and I'm glad they're back.
Oh, dude, it's just like I said last week. You can feel the electricity when you're watching home on the television.
Yes.
It's just the fans bring a different type of energy. And, the fights are, 99.9% of the time, the fights are exciting, no matter if there's fans or not. But there's just been something about these last two pay-per-views where the fans have just brought out these crazy fights, these crazy finishes, just things I've never even seen in the sport. And there's a few things we'll get to later, of course. But yeah, having the fans back has been great nonetheless.
And we have a new lightweight champion in one of the most insane fights at lightweight division I've ever seen, especially for a title. I mean, Charles and Michael Chandler come out and they get right after it. Like we talked about last week, we knew that a lot of this fight was going to be dictated on the feet, and boy, was it. They come out, Chandler comes out and really rocks him in the first, jumps guillotine. They scramble around, and then he hurts him bad, drops him. Looks like I thought Charles was going to be out of that fight, especially anybody that was out there that was doubting Charles Oliveira's heart. He has proved everyone wrong. He sat on that stool between rounds and came out like a demon in that second round. And who would have thunk that it'd be a left hook that was going to end up getting him that belt?
Yeah, it's crazy, Paul. When that fight started, I mean, the exchanges were fast. Chandler did a few things I thought he would. He went to the body early with that straight. Yep. And I remember the first level change in the first straight two he threw to the body. I kind of started to worry about him running into a knee. Like Charles Oliveira kind of feinted a knee when he threw that straight to the body. And I was like, oh, something about that little sequence just told me like this fight's going to get crazy. And of course it did. Chandler jumps guillotine, jumps gilly, as Dustin Poirier would say. And that was very odd to me because I've watched Michael Chandler compete, through all of the time he spent in other promotions. And that's not something that is really common for him. I know he has a few rear naked choke finishes, but for him to jump gilly, especially that early in the first round of the fight, it really surprised me. But man, just it would seem like there's a few things he could have done better that maybe could have changed the outcome of the fight. I was really surprised at how much he engaged Charles on the ground. I mean, he even used the guillotine to scramble and get on top, and he broke away from Charles Oliveira and just kind of started kicking at the legs and went back in the guard, started doing some ground and pound. And I'm just thinking like, this is where he wants to be. Even if you're not damaging him or anything like this is where Charles is most comfortable, is off his back. I mean, and that's rare for any fighter in the UFC. So the fight just started awkwardly. And then, it didn't take long in that second round for Charles to light him up with that left hook, and just beautifully timed. He just quit going backwards, stayed on his front foot, quit fighting on his heels, and really just landed that beautiful left hook that was the beginning of the end for Michael Chandler. But I mean, it was just an electric main event. So much fun for the short amount of time we had it.
Yeah, it was. I was going absolutely crazy right here in my living room / basement down here, and I actually won a friend of mine a lot of money because I predicted that Charles would win that fight by second round knockout. So shout out to Bill, collect that check, my man. I just had a feeling once they got started on the feet, we knew it was going to be dictated by that striking. And you're right, Mike was going to the body. I was worried about the knee. The front kick came really close to hurting him as well in that fight. But there's something about engaging Charles on the ground. I feel like a lot of guys think they're going to be able to overpower him. And we saw again that he's sneaky strong. He's one of those guys. He looks like he's just going to be this string bean that you're fighting. And that if you can avoid these crazy submissions, you'll be able to, out grapple him, pound him out. And I think that's what Michael Chandler was thinking, that if he got on top, he probably looked at some other fights where Charles began to wilt. If you give him a lot of top pressure, we've seen in the past that he wilts. If you've got good ground and pound like Chandler does, you might be able to break him. That is not the case with this new Charles. You got to remember, this guy has been through a lot. It took, 28 fights for him to get to this title shot. He was a bit of a 500 fighter. He grew up in the UFC. I think he got signed at 20 years old. He's been in there with Frankie Edgar, Cub Swanson, Donald Cerrone, now Tony Ferguson, Kevin Lee, myself, my buddy Jared Gordon. He's been through just the gauntlet of fighters in the UFC. And yeah, it took him a long time to find his footing, but now he's got the skills, he's got the stand up, and more importantly, He seems to have the heart, the toughness, and the confidence to be a champion. This guy shows up in his suit with his sunglasses, his nice new teeth, and he looks the part. He feels like he's a champion, and he's performing like a champion. I think that he's going to hold this belt for quite some time. That's my prediction. Whoever he gets next, whether it be, the winner of the Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier trilogy, or whatever ends up happening, I don't see anybody ripping that belt off him easily anytime soon. Michael, what about you?
No, I don't at all. And there's a lot of fun fights to be had at 155 pounds. I mean, right off the get-go, I think it's a no-brainer. Whether it's Poirier or Conor, whoever comes out on top in that trilogy, that's just who it has to be.
Yeah.
In both of those fights. You want to talk about exciting fights. those will be blockbuster main events. But, going back to what you were talking about with Charles Oliveira kind of finding his groove in this 8-fight win streak he's been on, he's just like, you can't emphasize enough where he was just been perceived by the media as a guy that chokes in the big fights. The Cub Swanson fight, the Paul Felder fight, which, by the way, Chandler might have been watching a little bit too much of the film on your guys' fight, because you laid out the blueprint. You know what I mean? If you can get this guy to throw up submissions and get him to just lose confidence, he's going to wilt under the pressure. And he's just overcame that hump with flying colors. That first round against Michael Chandler was about as challenging as one could be. And the Charles Oliveira of old, the 500 fighter that we saw before he became this great champion, not 10 times out of 10, he would have found a way out in that fight. And he's just not that guy anymore. And I think that's what's going to be the key to his successes, because skills wise, this guy out wrestled Tony Ferguson, who's known for his wrestling. He's outstriking strikers left, right, and center. And we already know he's the best submission artist in the UFC, because he has the most submission wins and the most finishes. So he holds the record for finishes. He holds the record for submissions. Who's going to beat this guy? If he is sound between the ears, I don't see a guy at lightweight that's going to give him any fits. And it's going to take some time for there to be a guy, which I have one in mind, that could possibly challenge Charles Oliveira, but I'm not going to mention him because he's so far away. He's got other fights ahead of him, but just nonetheless, very exciting time to be a Charles Oliveira fan. Very exciting time, Michael, to see him win the belt.
Michael, who is it? Who you got in mind? Makhachev?
That's what I was going to say. I hate to be. I'm not riding DC's jock and trying to give his boy some shine, but that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a guy that a guy from the Eastern Bloc of the world that can wrestle like a mofo and can grapple with the best of them, and is well-rounded and is very Khabib-esque. And who better than Islam Makhachev? But that's going to take some time. So it's not something I want to put too much emphasis in, because there's just so many guys right on the forefront. You got Conor and Poirier. They're going to settle the trilogy July 10th. It could be the winner of that. There's a Justin Gaethje waiting in the wings. There's other guys, right in the top 5, top 7 that, are really, really close to that title fight. So I don't want to put too much emphasis in Islam, but I think his time will come.
But I agree. No, I agree. And it's right. A lot of people are ducking him. Nobody in this room could possibly be doing that.
That's correct. That is correct.
All personal stuff aside with Makhachev, I do think that it's a guy like that could challenge somebody like Charles Oliveira, who's super strong, who's good enough on the feet and needs room for improvement, but he's got time to do that. I agree. He's not there yet. He's got some people he's got to beat up first, which I think he'll do. And I think he will get there if Charles is still the holder. And I think Beneil Dariush, I don't know if he's next in line. There's some bigger names with some bigger profile fights that'll probably get this opportunity first. But I think he's a fight away, in my opinion, from being that guy. And he has also got the skill sets. He can match him on the ground. He can stay safe, not only stay safe, but he's very physically strong and has the jiu-jitsu skills to match Charles all day. And on the feet, he's a southpaw who loves to slug, is not afraid to get into a dust-up with somebody like Charles. And he's bigger. He's more of a natural 155er. I love that fight. And I would love to see down the line. If Beneil and Charles Oliveira, who haven't fought before, could go in there and mix it up, I think he's another one. We talked about it last week. I do think that he's becoming the dark horse after what he just did to Tony Ferguson. Beneil, Makhachev, but obviously first and foremost, we're going to have to see either Conor or Dustin first. I think especially Dustin, I believe, has earned that shot. If he wins and beats Conor a second time, he deserves to be that man to go in there and challenge Charles. But we could talk that main event absolutely all day long. So let's move on. Let's talk more importantly about the loser of that main event, Michael Chandler. Only 2 fights in the UFC, 1-1. You lost to Charles Oliveira, who was on an 8-fight winning streak before that, now 9-fight winning streak. Nothing to worry about there. Your career's not over by any means, but where does he go from here? All the hype behind him, coming in, getting these big fights, jumping right into a title shot, and then to get finished like that. What's next for Michael Chandler?
Well, the stars really aligned for him to get into that main event because Dustin Poirier is the guy that made the decision to not take the title fight. He said they had gave him the option, like, hey, do you want to fight Charles Oliveira for the belt? You want to settle the score with Conor? And he did the right thing. You take the money fight with Conor. That is going to be one of the biggest fights of the year, one of the biggest fights of the new decade in 2021. But with Michael Chandler, the stars aligned. You get this huge finish over Dan Hooker on Fight Island. And with Poirier making that decision, essentially you became the man. Justin Gaethje's on a loss, and we've seen the UFC give fighters title fights on a loss, but it doesn't happen very often. So the stars align perfectly. You pay Michael Chandler the big bucks. The stars align for him to get in a title fight. You put him in there, and he delivered. I mean, the skills are there. The guy, he's been one of the most exciting lightweights to watch in the entire world since he's been in the spotlight. And he had a stellar first round, and I give him all the praise in the world. But there's one thing that really kind of threw me off with this fight is in hindsight, they released the judges' scorecards, and 2 judges had it 10-8 for Michael Chandler. And you got to remember, you got to go back to that first round. Charles Oliveira spent a big chunk of that round on his back, threatening submissions, putting him in danger. The 10-8 round's very questionable, and that's kind of been a reoccurring theme these last few weeks, these last few months. There's been some very awkward judging these last few fights. Like, I remember the Kai Kamaka fight when he fought TJ Brown.
Yes.
Very questionable judging, but that was in Las Vegas. Now it's kind of everywhere we go. Questionable judging in Houston, Texas. And then, I'm not trying to take a shot at their commission, but that was not a 10-8 round. And I don't know. The thing that's awkward about this, Paul, is Houston, Texas, for UFC 262, they did not adopt the new unified rules. And the new unified rules are much more giving with 10-8 rounds. So you would almost wonder, like, my instant reaction is, it has something to do with the set of rules they're going by. No, it's not. They're going by the old rules, which is harder to get a 10-8 round in the old rules, in the old unified rules of MMA. So very interesting, very questionable.
Yeah, you're right. They're all over the place. And even the problem with the scoring isn't just when these judges get the wrong fighter to win. It's even when they get it right, it's all over the place and doesn't make sense. Like you're talking about, like, let's say that went on to a decision and Charles still won if it was justifiable. It still might have been awkward and weird on the judges' scorecards because of these 10-8 rounds, because one judge sees it 30-27 for this guy, 30-27 the other way for this guy, and then that, goes back 29-28 for it doesn't make any sense. They're all watching and seeing a completely different fight. That's where it worries me, because even when they're getting it right, it's like, wait a minute. Okay, you got the right guy, but the way that you all got there is so asinine. It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, hopefully that's something that we can start to get fixed. I don't know the solution, but something's got to happen, because the judging in MMA is up there with boxing now. It's just looking corrupt, looking all over the place. I'm not saying these guys are trying to sabotage anybody. I don't think they are. I just think a lot of it's incompetence. But one of the other things I want to talk about is, let's talk about guys or women, whoever in the UFC, who's maybe a 500 fighter or just over 500 on their record, who you think has the potential to do something like Charles Oliveira, who's shown that they have all the potential in the world, but just haven't been able to string together the consistency and the win streak that they need to get to the title. Is there anybody out there that's maybe a 4 or 5 fights away from becoming a potential contender, but they can't get it together?
Well, this person's already become a champion. And I know we've talked about this in the past, but I mean, the first person to come to mind for me is Jan Blachowicz. And I know that you asked which 500 fighter that isn't a champion right now, and I can't think of somebody on the top of my head. You know, maybe a Korean Zombie who's had a few mixed results. He hasn't had a ton of fights in the UFC, but he's got a few mixed results. But the one that comes to my mind is Jan Blachowicz, because he was below a 500 fighter. This guy was 2-4 in his first 6 fights in the UFC. You know, you want to talk about an unlikely story in his path to become a champion, and he'd still lost a fight in the midst of his title run after he'd already gone 2-4. So he's a guy that comes to my mind, one of the greatest underdog, you know, poor UFC record guys to come along and get that 12 pounds of gold, strapped around his waist. So that would be the first guy that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, and that's who I think of as a prime example. And now, obviously, we have another example of somebody like Charles Oliveira, of somebody that's gone on and become a champion, even though the early part of their career was a bit rocky. And I think that just shows you that in this sport, unlike many, many other sports, especially unlike boxing, right? We discussed this when we had our little format meeting last night, that boxing is one of those sports you lose 2 or 3 and it's like, okay, you're done. You sucked. Nobody cares about you anymore. Whereas MMA, we don't pad the record, right? I'll say that. We don't pad the records. Most of these guys, especially once you're in the UFC, you are fighting other guys or women who are just absolutely at the top of their game. And there's going to be losses had. And it's more about overcoming that adversity and can you push through, because it's going to happen. There's too many ways to lose. There's not just kickboxing. It's not just boxing. It's not just jiu-jitsu. Even if you're the best in one of them, there's a way that person, you could slip throwing a head kick. The guy gets on top of you. You go to get up, you're guillotined. Doesn't matter. You could be 9 times out of 10, you're a better fighter than that person. Doesn't matter. You got choked that night, right? That's how MMA works. So really, it's a display of toughness. And I think that's what really sticks out to me about Jan Blachowicz and about Charles Oliveira. These guys did not give up. And Charles really made a point to mention that, you know, you've got to overcome these adversities. And that's what life is all about. And I'm really happy for that guy. I got to be honest with you. It's good to see a new champion. It's good to see somebody like Charles who's busted their butt to get to where they are. Speaking of somebody else who's been through a lot of adversities, who's had a lot of ups and downs in their career and is currently on a mad winning streak and just beat one of the baddest dudes at lightweight, Beneil Dariush. We already mentioned him a little bit in the segment before this, but this dude, what is it, 7 in a row? Is that 7 for him in a row now?
7 in a row with 5 finishes.
Insane, bro.
5 finishes and 5 bonuses. I mean, you want to talk about a stellar run. I mean, it might even be 6 bonuses. He might have doubled up on one of those, but I know that, you know, in the midst of this amazing win streak he's on, you know, he's pocketed some great bonuses, some great finishes. And he's fought top level competition. And, you know, I wanted to save this little nugget headed into this segment, Paul, but you got to remember this guy was booked to fight Charles Oliveira before he fought Diego Ferreira. And Charles Oliveira had fell off, and Beneil stayed on the card, and he fought Diego Ferreira. Really tough, exciting fight. But there is a storyline. There is a storyline where I think that I will go out on a limb and say Beneil is more than a dark horse in the division. He's a guy that's on a great winning streak, and you never know what to expect in this sport. Who's to say that whoever wins on July 10th between Conor and Poirier doesn't come out 100% and they're laid up with an injury, you know, and Charles wants to fight. Who's going to be there to answer that call? I don't think Beneil's the dark horse. I just think he's the next best guy in line right now. And he's got the skills, he's got the win streak, he's got the management. We all know that. And I just think that this is a guy that he presents a lot of problems for the champion. I'll even go out on a limb and say his skill set is more well-rounded to match Charles's more so than a Poirier or a Conor, because he's got the high-level Brazilian jiu-jitsu. You know, this guy's been under Rafael Cordeiro for years. His striking is nasty, and he's as tough as they come. You know, I think he's got as good of a skill set, if not better, than a Conor or a Poirier. So it's really great to see Beneil, who's a guy I've shared the octagon with in the past. It's great to see him have such great success right now, but I mean, he's as tough as they come, and he looked phenomenal on Saturday night.
Yeah, big fan, Beneil Dariush. One of the nicest, sweetest human beings you'll meet, but crazy, right? He matched that crazy. He went out there and he took it to Tony. And have we heard any reports yet on Tony's knee, by the way? Because he was just cranking that heel hook, and you saw Tony, again, props and shout out to Tony Ferguson for being the madman that he is in the UFC. You got to love this guy. Anybody out there that's talking trash because Tony's on a losing streak can go F themselves and get out of here, because this guy goes out there and lays it on the line for these people and these fans every single time. He wanted to scream when he was stuck in that heel hook, but the toughness, you saw him just swallow that and get through it and finish that fight. So let's move on to that then. What does Tony do from here? He's already put out some tweets in the media that he's not giving up, he's not quitting, he's thanking the supporters and the fans, obviously, that are with him. But the issue that a lot of us thought was that he needed to make some adjustments, that he needed to bring in some new coaching. He brought in Freddie Roach. He brought in people. DC also mentioned a pretty important thing, that the basics seem to be lacking, right? It's not the toughness. It's not the determination. It's not the crazy. We got a lot of that. But it just seems like the years where maybe he focused on being a wild man and not really on the bare bones, get back to basic skill sets, seems to be haunting him now later in his 30s and in his career.
You know, I got to give a shout out to DC, because I would totally be stealing his, his insight on this fight. But I was listening to a show with Ariel yesterday, and he said a really interesting thing that really made sense of why we've seen these results from Tony, because I'm questioning it. I mean, 12-fight win streak, stellar. You would never guess this is happening right now. I know he's up there in age, but you don't see a guy with that kind of fall from grace happen so fast. And when you're young and you have youth on your side, you can stray from the fundamentals. You could be just a wild. You can lean on your craziness and be wild and your athleticism and your youth to do very unorthodox things that are outside of the basics of mixed martial arts. But as time goes on, those things come up, they catch up to you. And I think that that's what's happening with Tony Ferguson. I noticed that we don't see the same coaches in his corner that he had when he was on that 12-fight win streak. There's always these new coaches in different guys these last 3 fights. And as critical as we are of Tony Ferguson, we also got to remember, look at the last 3 guys he's fought. Yes. I mean, we're quick to jump the gun on saying a guy's done when they're on an 0-3 losing streak. But you look at the 3 losses: Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira, Beneil Dariush. Like, where's the shame in that? He's not like he's losing to bums. He's fighting the cream of the crop every fight, and that's what he's done. Like 90% of his UFC career, he's always fighting the best guys. So you got to give Ferguson a little bit of slack. I don't think he's done. I definitely think he's far from done. I think that there's still a fight left in Tony, but I think that maybe it's that time to start stepping away from the title picture. There's still fights that he could win. Step away from the title picture. Look at what, take a fight against a guy that's unranked, that's got like some name value, or maybe go to the bottom of the top 15. You don't got to fight the cream of the crop every fight. I'd still like to see Tony Ferguson compete. And big shout out to Tony Ferguson as well for getting the bonuses raised in Texas. If there's anybody that can get fighter pay raised, it's Tony Ferguson. I mean, there were so many great things that happened last weekend, Paul, but Tony Ferguson was the star of the show. Make no mistake. I mean, he made that press conference exciting. He brought a lot of noise out of the fans. He's a fan-friendly fighter. I mean, it was good to see him back in front of the fans, but I mean, he kind of stole the show, in my opinion, at 262. And there was a lot of great things going on that night. And the crazy thing is, he stole the show on a loss. He didn't win his fight, but he still managed to bring so much buzz through the fight week. So shout out to Tony Ferguson.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Don't want to see him go anywhere. I think there's still tons of fights that Tony Ferguson can do well in. I just think he's got to take a little time. And agree. Just don't worry about fighting the number 1 contender, the guy that's going to put you into that line. I'm not saying that he shouldn't consider himself a contender to be able to challenge for the belt someday at all, but just don't have that be the only goal that you're fighting for. Maybe just get some wins, go out there, get yourself back in that win column, get that confidence back up. But speaking of father time taking over, Jacare, unfortunately had a pretty horrific night on Saturday, got caught in the submission, is an absolute savage and a G, decided to not tap and just let the upper part of his arm snap like a pretty thick tree branch. I mean, when we heard the replays, it was pretty disgusting when you think about that. And then to just stand up and be like, "Oh yeah, that's not good."
The guy didn't even flinch.
No.
He just like it didn't even register to him. Look, for people that don't know about Jacare Souza's toughness, I'm sure you have a good idea now. But for us hardcore fans, I'll remember. I don't remember the exact year, but Jacare Souza was at Jiu-Jitsu Worlds, and he was in the finals against Roger Gracie. And Roger Gracie is one of the most decorated black belts of all time. And Roger Gracie's notoriously got this great armbar, and he catches Jacare Souza in the gi, breaks his arm, and Jacare doesn't stop the match. He gets up in his arm, and you can see, and he's wearing a big baggy gi. You can see his arm is hanging and dangling. He ties his arm in his belt of his gi, finishes the match, and wins. That's the type of toughness that Jacare Souza possesses. When his arm broke on Saturday night, he didn't even flinch. He just was like, "Oh, my arm's done." Broke his humerus. That's a very big, large bone, and especially I'd like to imagine that Jacare Souza is probably in the top percentile of UFC fighters, with probably biggest, densest bones if you've ever seen the guy. He's a freak. He's a freak of nature. He's a genetic monster. So, it's tough to see these last few pay-per-views, to see some of these older guys go through these horrific injuries. And I guess take age out of the equation in general, just to see any fighter on the roster have these horrific injuries back-to-back pay-per-views. I mean, that's like why I said earlier at the beginning of the show that these last few events, we've seen just complete freak incidences. Just we've been seeing things that we don't see in this sport, or at least not very often in the UFC. So big, same thing for Chris Weidman. Big shout out to Jacare Souza and his family, and I hope he's recovering well. I know he had surgery either yesterday or today.
Yeah,
so I'm sure he's on the mend.
He's got a plate in there now, I'm sure.
Shout out to the former Strikeforce middleweight champion.
It's a pretty serious injury, and I don't think we'll see Jacare back, unfortunately. And I don't think he should. I think he's now entered that club of some of these legends and some of my favorite fighters coming up through the sport that should find something to keep their mind and body occupied outside of fighting. And shout out to his opponent, Andre. Help me out, Michael.
Which one? Barboza? Who? What were you saying?
Yeah, I was talking about Jacare's opponent for catching him in that. Incredible.
I can't get out of my mind either. I'm having a brain fart. I was listening to you and Mike Ricci at the same time. Shout out to the producer, Mike Ricci. You're the man.
Mike Ricci's trying.
Andre Muniz. There it is. Andre Muniz. Sorry.
Time. So thanks for that, Ricci. Calm yourself down.
Yeah, always cooking it up. On one last note on that, what made that, just from a technical standpoint, before we move on, which I'm sure is, I just put out the dead giveaway. We're moving on to Edson Barboza versus Shane Burgos. But the way that Andre locked up that armbar, he didn't just bend the arm straight. He latched his chest onto the outside of his arm. So it was like the combination of like a key lock and an armbar. He wasn't just bending his arm straight. He was bending his arm back and out this way, which for all of you back home, hold your fist right in front of your face. Try to turn your arm away from yourself and imagine your arm getting stretched. That's like the worst way you could possibly get armbarred. So the way he did it, the whole sequence was beautiful, devastating nonetheless. It's like the double-edged sword of this sport. It's beautiful violence. It looks great, but somebody has to pay a dear price, and it unfortunately had to be Jacare Souza. So we're moving on. Burgos and Barboza, freak knockout, Paul. Wow, your former foe, your former arch nemesis, who's one of the nicest guys in the UFC, Edson Barboza, looked absolutely sensational against an ultra tough Shane Burgos. And talk us through that sequence, Paul. What are your thoughts when you see the delayed KO of Shane Burgos?
Man, that's one of those situations where I was worried about Shane. I know Shane pretty well. Grew up coming up through the CFFC circuit on the East Coast. Tiger Schulman guy, New York, New Jersey. So I've seen a lot of Shane. I'm a big fan. Fantastic fighter, fantastic stand-up. But to see him get hit like that and have such a delayed reaction, I thought something was seriously wrong. I thought he was having like a seizure after that hit. the way that he stepped back and then just started falling over and was convulsing. Edson did his job and followed up with extra punches, but he didn't have to. That he was knocked out. That was literally a delayed KO. I mean, it shouldn't have even really been a TKO. I don't know what it was officially labeled as, but that overhand right ultimately seconds later knocked him out. When Shane went down and face planted, he was done. It just took a while to set in. Normally we see that shot land and a guy just flatlines, goes down and is out. It's very rare that we see somebody get hit with that, step back and then go out. We've seen people step back, get chicken legged a second later, or step back and have a reaction that maybe it hurts their head and they go down. But rarely do you see, if ever, I've never seen somebody get hit with a shot like that, look fine. As a matter of fact, kind of like almost taunt him, like, come on, bring it on, and then take a few steps back and be KO'd. The sport's crazy, man. So, you know, you got to respect Shane's toughness, but hopefully he'll take some time off. Hopefully everything's okay. He seemed fine. It seemed like a normal knockout that you'd get up and you recover from, but that was a weird situation. But again, shout out to Edson Barboza. My goodness, his stand-up looked better than ever, and he's already been one of the best, most dynamic, scariest strikers in the UFC, and now his hands looking like that, mixing in those kicks. I mean, he just looked unbelievable. It looked nice and big at featherweight too. Looks like he's starting to really cut that weight and put the size back on in a really healthy way. So he might be a new contender at 145 after that fight. Edson's looking sharp.
Yeah, Paul. I mean, what a sensational performance from Edson Barboza. You know, he went to that overhand right a few times. It always found his mark. He looked more accurate than he ever has. And you know, usually when a fighter gets towards the end of their career, usually the right move is to jump up. You know, I was very reluctant to get on board with Edson Barboza going down to 145 pounds because he's a fairly decent sized lightweight, and he just has looked sensational. In my opinion, he should be 3-0 in his last 3 fights. You know, his debut, he came up short against Dan Ige, beat Makwan Amirkhani, looked great against Shane Burgos, and 145 is a stacked division, and there's a ton of fun fights you could do with Edson Barboza. I mean, I'm looking at the top 10, top 15, and I'm looking at the Josh Emmett's and the Calvin Caters and the Max Holloways, and you can essentially assert him into that conversation because he has looked amazing these last 3 fights.
Yeah, I mean, Giga Chikadze, I'm not sure where he's ranked, but you know, you want to talk about guys that love to throw that left kick. They can have a battle on who throws that kick better, who has the better stand-up. Giga says he's got the best boxing, better than Max Holloway won at that fight, but that fight obviously probably not going to happen for him. I'm not exactly sure where they both fall in the rankings, but who doesn't want to see that matchup right there? I'll sign up for that one all day. And speaking of great matchups that we have coming up, especially when we're talking about the striking department, we've got Cody Garbrandt taking on Rob Font this Saturday, and I cannot wait for that fight. You want to talk about a bantamweight clash and potentially setting themselves up for a title shot. Aljamain Sterling obviously just had neck surgery. He's going to be out for quite a while. So depending on who comes out of this, the winner, if they come out healthy, they could be setting themselves up for a title shot. If Aljamain's unable to defend his belt, they might have to put an interim belt on the line in between, and the winner of this could be facing Petr Yan. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a possibility, and how excited are you for this weekend?
Well, I mean, it's going to be a boxing heavy affair. We know both guys have a very boxing heavy approach, but nonetheless, they can throw, you know, any type of strike. You know, Cody's as creative as they come. I've seen some of his training videos. It looks like he's doing like these weird, like grounded roundhouse kicks to his teammates' legs, like something out of Street Fighter. You know, he's got a very diverse attack, and same with Rob Font. The New England Cartel's rolling strong. You know, those guys they diversified their weapons, but they, you know, him and Calvin Cater both really rely on their boxing, and Rob Font has a very sensational jab. Cody's just got hand speed and volume, and he's great with his angles. And I think it's going to be a fight that, you know, if I was to bet some money on it, I would say it's going to end up on the feet for whether it goes 5 rounds or ends in a finish. But yeah, this could be the next guy to challenge for the title, even if they don't do an interim title. You know, they're going to do Petr Yan and Aljamain Sterling if Aljamain can come back, you know, healthy and in proper time. But regardless, I think whoever wins this fight should be clamored as should be labeled as the number 1 contender. I know Cody's been clamoring for that fight with Petr Yan. ever since he beat Uriah Faber. So there's good storylines there. And, you know, when you talk about dark horses, I think Rob Font is the dark horse of the bantamweight division. Not a lot of people are talking about him, and he's really put himself in a nice position in this main event with this great win streak he's been on in his performances. So, you know, whether Aljamain comes back in good time or not, I think whoever wins this fight will be the number one contender, and we'll see how it shakes out. I mean, it's going to be a fun main event.
Oh, it's going to be such a fun main event. Both those guys so good on the feet and so well-rounded, even if it becomes a grappling match. Both guys fantastic on the mat, great wrestling, just so well-rounded. But it is time to move on, of course, to our 5 rounds here at the end of our show. In the first round, we have the Ultimate Fighter coming back. Michael Chiesa, winner of the Ultimate Fighter. Look at you. You're all prepared for this, coming out June 1st. What are your thoughts? How excited are you? Are you glad the Ultimate Fighter is back? You've got to be. I mean, as somebody that's been on the show, won the show, possibly one of the craziest seasons because of the live aspect. So what are your thoughts on the show coming back?
I love the platform for the Ultimate Fighter. You know, I feel like the Contender Series is good in terms of grooming prospects to put into the UFC. But the Ultimate Fighter is good because you get to know the athletes on a more compassionate level. Like, you get to connect with them more, get to learn about their life stories, and you know, the production crew, the Ultimate Fighter. It's the same team as always. Shout out to my boy Gary DeFranco. I freaking love you. You know, but the Ultimate Fighter debut on June 1st. It's very ironic because I have a teammate, and I can say this because it's public. My teammate Brady Heaston made the show, he's you know, he's a teammate of mine, young kid, and he's got a great life story. And not only that, he can fight his freaking butt off. So it's ironic that they're debuting this show on June 1st, which is the day I won it, which is the day of my mom's birthday, and it's the day I get to watch the younger generation of the guys in my gym start to make waves on the Ultimate Fighter and in the UFC. So it's a very exciting time, man. And you know how I feel about that show. It's got a special place in my heart. So I'm super excited to see what comes out of season 29 on the Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I love the show. And it's been long enough of a break that I'm really excited to see it come back, right? I mean, we were kind of getting hit with Ultimate Fighter after Ultimate Fighter. So it was nice that there was a little bit of a break, and now it's coming back. So that little break will only enhance the show and make people more interested in it. Round 2, Francis Ngannou taking on Derek Lewis in the rematch, I believe in August. So his first title defense, possibly one of the most boring fights in heavyweight history, but to run it back. Look, I'm not taking anything away from those guys. They're both
it's true.
The scariest men on the planet. I don't blame them for not wanting to necessarily engage with each other, but I can guarantee you the second time around will be different. Derek is a lot different, and more importantly, Francis Ngannou has looked incredible and different, really evolving his game, mixing things up. His wrestling has looked fantastic. I think if it's not a quick knockout, we might even see Francis display some of his offensive wrestling that I know that he's been working on over there at Extreme Couture and with Eric Nixick and all those guys. So super exciting fight right there. I don't think we're going to see a repeat of the first fight. No,
you know, you got to give. Yeah, first and foremost, I'm reluctant to say this because you, my friend, you got some balls, because I'm afraid for Derek Lewis, afraid to say, I'd be afraid to be like, that fight was boring.
Listen, I fought that same night, right?
I know.
Before them, or right before them, I fought Mike Perry in an insane broken arm bloodbath of a fight. So I have every right, as I was sitting in the hospital getting my arm tended to, caked in blood. So if they've got anything to say to me, I'll show them the pictures from my fight that night, and they can show me the pictures from their injuries that night and the 5 strikes that were thrown. I love both those guys. Derek Lewis might try to beat me up after this, but Francis, he's pretty chill.
Rough night for both of us, actually. That was the night I fought Anthony Pettis. So,
oh,
you know, but we go back to the Lewis and Ngannou fight. You know, Derek, or for Francis, to give Francis some slack, you know, that was his first fight after the first Stipe Miocic match, in a fight where he got completely exhausted. He was in a grueling 5-round fight that saw him just almost to just like the point of just death by exhaustion, you know. So I think that he has some personal reservations headed into that Derek Lewis fight, that maybe he had that fear of fatigue, you know, but obviously he's gotten over that. So it should be exciting to see how this second fight plays out.
Yeah, agreed. And again, you know, I'm kind of busting chops and having fun here. Obviously, I don't want any parts of either one of those guys. So Derek Lewis, Francis Ngannou, please forgive my insubordination here. I hope you will forgive me, because I will be calling your fights in the future at some point, and I don't want to get beat up at fighter meetings. Moving on, round 3. Luke Rockhold says he's getting ducked by everybody in the top 10. He wants to come back. What's a dream matchup for you, Mike? Anybody out there at middleweight? Is he coming back at middleweight or 205? What's he want to do?
I think he's coming back in middleweight. He's looking pretty lean.
Yeah.
I think he's looking for an immediate booking, and it looks like things are kind of filling up fast. So I think if I'm Luke, I'm going to sit back and see what happens with this Edmund Shabazian, Jack Hermanson fight. See how that fight plays out. Maybe try to lobby for a match with one of those guys. Maybe in the fall. The middleweight tournament has continued to progress. There's been a lot of big bookings amongst the guys in the top 10. I don't think anybody's ducking Luke Rockhold, but I'd like to see him fight the winner of the Shabazian Hermanson fight, or even the loser. Just one of the guys involved in that fight, I think, is what makes sense for him. Yeah,
lots of good fights, right? Lots of bookings that have happened. Obviously, winners and losers are going to be coming out of those things. So, I think if Luke just shows a little bit of patience, there's some really fun matchups. And I think some matchups that he could do really well in and potentially make another run. It depends. He's had some big knockouts. He took a lot of time off, though. So hopefully he's let himself heal up and he'll come back stronger than ever. Round 4, Beneil Dariush with an interesting call out on the mic. We're expecting him to call some fighters out. Instead, he calls out Elon Musk, asking for his Tesla. Elon responds and says, "Excuse me, I'm sorry for the delay. It's on its way." If you had the opportunity, Michael, and you're on the mic and there's something that you could get like a Tesla, what are you calling out for on the mic if somebody's going to give it to you?
I put a lot of thought into it. I'd go the Cowboy Cerrone route. I would hit up Supra Boats. Be like, yo, Supra, what up with the boat, man? Like, I'm trying to get that cowboy treatment. I mean, I know he's tougher than me and he's much more of a legend and maybe a little more marketable, but come on, man, throw your boy a boat or two. You know what I'm saying? Hook a brother up. You know what I'm saying? Give me one of those nice little boats I can get some surfing and wakeboarding in, and take the niece and nephews out on. So that would probably be my path to calling out. Is I look up the CEO and president of Super Boats. I'd call him out to send me a new little vessel. What about you, Paul?
Yeah. I'm calling out for some of the baddest bikes in the world. I want some free bikes coming my way, man. These things are expensive. We're talking, a mid-range bike, $5-6 grand. Some of the higher end tri bikes, we're talking $10,000 to $12,000. I want some of them rolling up into my house and all that kind of stuff. So any bike sponsorships that want to come my way, if you see this thing, I got a bunch of races lined up. I got about 3 lined up, maybe 4 for this summer. So get your boy some nice tri bikes. I need a nice road bike. I want a nice murdered out road bike, and then a nice casual go ride with my girlfriend and the kids kind of road bike. I want a bad tri bike. I want some new wheels. I can sit here all day on what I want with that. But so a sick bike sponsorship would be what I want.
All right, Paul. So moving on to round 5, which is always the funnest round of the show. So before I move on, I gotta get myself prepared here. It's June. June's around the corner. And my guy, Paulie Felder, about to swim, bike, and run in his first Ironman. Paul, you're about 3 weeks out. Tell us how you feel. How's preparation been going for you? Fill us in on your Ironman journey.
It's really good. Loving it, man. Really, really obsessed with this sport. It's kind of rejuvenated me, made me a much healthier person in the off season, between fights and things like that. And walking around at like 172 right now, man. Getting down to 168 after certain runs and bike rides, but starting to peak. We're less than 3 weeks out now. I'll go out a few days early to Roanoke, Virginia to do this thing. My first 70.3. I've got another one in July in Oregon. Then I'm going to do a couple local ones, a little shorter Olympic distance ones. Then I'm doing one in October in Maryland, another 70.3. So hopefully by next year, I would like to compete in my first full Ironman distance, which will probably have me walking around about a 165. For anybody that doesn't know, obviously it's 1.2 mile swim, 56-mile bike, and a half marathon. So the other day, I had a really good time on the run, which gave me a lot of confidence. I did a close to 12 miles in about an hour and a half. Obviously, when I race, I plan on doing it. The goal is 5 hours or less. There's some hills in Roanoke. I don't know how the open water is going to go, so we'll see. Doing lots of open water training now, though. Just very excited. Can't wait to get in there. And yeah, hopefully someday I'll get on the podium for the age groups. We'll see.
Hey, well, I'm sending you my well wishes. I'm sure all your fans around the world are sending you your well wishes, and you better believe you got to let me know when you're in Oregon, Paul, because that's only a state away. So I would love to stand. I would love to stand at the rail with my glasses, our matching shades. Yeah. That this wasn't planned, people. For those of you that don't know, this is how much me and this guy connect. We got the same helmet and the same glasses, and we didn't even know that one another had it. But look, I would love to stand on the sideline, Paul, and hand you some water as you're running your first Ironman, second Ironman in Oregon. So you got to let me know when you get there, and we're all sending you our well wishes, and you're going to do great, man.
Thanks, buddy. I really appreciate that. And yeah, if I didn't even think about that, I'd love for you to come out. I'll definitely hit you out when we're coming out there. I think it's July. I forget, but we'll talk about it anyway. Anyway, guys, that's going to be the end of our show. But again, I just want to reinforce, I know we didn't get to do it this week, but please hashtag UFC Roundup in the comments section here on YouTube, or hit us up on social media. Me and Michael are pretty active on Twitter, whether it be Instagram, Twitter, or whatever. Hit us up, hashtag UFC Roundup, with any questions that you might have for us. We're going to try to get them on the show moving forward. Also, enjoy the fights this weekend. A pretty major bout at Bantamweight coming up. And we'll see you guys in a few weeks. I'm not sure when. After my race, I believe is the next time we'll be doing this. So please send us questions. And that's peace out from me. And we'll see you guys soon.
Peace out, y'all.